Hello, everyone. It's Alara. I'm 38 years old now, and I live a quiet, peaceful life. But for the longest time, peace was something I only read about in books, something other people seemed to possess effortlessly. My world felt like a constant negotiation, a performance where I was always trying to earn a place I already should have had. My story is about learning that some bonds, even family ones, can be toxic, and sometimes, the bravest thing you can do is break free. It's a story about betrayal, the kind that doesn't involve dramatic affairs or grand thefts, but the slow, insidious kind that chips away at your soul, layer by layer. It's about realizing that the people who are supposed to love you unconditionally can sometimes be the very ones holding you back, keeping you small. Have you ever felt like you were constantly giving, 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 only to be overlooked, or worse, resented for having anything left for yourself? If you have, maybe you'll see a little bit of yourself in my journey. Let me take you back to where my story, the real story of my awakening, began. Let me show you the moment the foundation I thought was solid crumbled, and how I finally started to build something new, something that was truly mine. I stood in the hallway of my childhood home, the familiar scent of lemon polish and old paperbacks clinging to the air, and listened to my mother's voice from the living room. It was a voice I knew intimately, honeyed and low when she wanted something, sharp and brittle when she was thwarted, and now it held a note of performative exhaustion that set my teeth on edge. She was talking about Liam, my younger brother, again. Always Liam. Liam needed help. Liam needed a place to stay. Liam needed money. Liam needed everything, it seemed, and had needed it for as long as I could remember. I was 35 then, theoretically a successful woman with a stable job, a small but comfortable apartment of my own, and a life I had built meticulously, brick by careful brick, because I knew no one else was going to build it for me. But stepping back into that house, into the gravitational pull of my family, I felt 15 again, invisible and obligated. My mother sighed dramatically, a sound that could curdle milk. He's just so sensitive, Alara. The world is hard on him. I leaned against the cool floral wallpaper, closing my eyes for a brief moment. Sensitive. That was the word they used for Liam's inability to hold down a job, his string of failed ventures, his chronic need for loans that were never repaid. Sensitive was the opposite of me. I was resilient, practical, the strong one. These weren't compliments, they were reasons given for why my needs always came last. He says the landlord is threatening eviction again, Mother continued, her voice drifting into the hallway. He's just a bit short this month. Needs a couple thousand to catch up. A couple thousand. Again. The familiar knot tightened in my stomach. This was the pattern. Liam would mess up, Mother would panic, and I would be quietly, or not so quietly, expected to fix it. My bank account wasn't a source of my financial security. It was the family's emergency fund, specifically earmarked for Liam's emergencies. I pushed off the wall and walked into the living room. The room was exactly as it had been for decades. Heavy velvet curtains, polished wood furniture that gleamed dully, and framed photos of a family that looked happier, lighter, than we often felt. Mother sat on the sofa, twisting a lace handkerchief in her hands. Liam was sprawled in the armchair, looking sullen, his eyes flicking towards me with a mixture of expectation and faint resentment. He rarely met my gaze head-on when he needed something. "Hi, Liam," I said, keeping my voice neutral. He mumbled something non-committal, picking at the arm of the chair. "Alara, thank goodness you're here," Mother said, her voice now shifting into that urgent, pleading tone. "I don't know what he'll do if he loses his place. It's not good for his anxiety." His anxiety. Not my anxiety, the low hum of stress I carried constantly, wondering if I would ever have enough saved for my own future, if I would ever be able to make a significant purchase like a flat, or even just feel secure, or if it would all be siphoned off, drip by careful drip, into the black hole of Liam's needs. "Have you talked to him about getting a roommate?" I asked, sitting on the edge of the other armchair, resisting the urge to sink into its familiar, comforting cushions. Comfort felt earned here, and I rarely felt I had earned it. He needs his privacy for his work, Mother said dismissively. Liam nodded in agreement, though his work was a vague concept that seemed to involve a lot of time spent at home and no discernible income. Or downsizing? I pressed gently. He's in a 2-bedroom apartment. But he needs the extra room for his projects, Mother insisted, as if projects were a tangible, income-generating entity and not just another euphemism. I looked at Liam. Liam, we talked about this last time. This can't keep happening. You need a budget. He finally looked up, his expression injured. It's easy for you to say. You've got a steady job. You don't understand what it's like out there. The familiar heat rose in my chest, the invalidation. The automatic positioning of himself as the victim, the one who needed understanding and aid, while I was the privileged one, the one whose stable life was apparently just handed to her. They never saw the years of careful planning, the sacrifices I had made, the overtime I'd worked, the small pleasures I'd denied myself to build that stability he envied and exploited. My stability wasn't a gift, it was a fortress I had built against the chaos I grew up in. I understand that bills need to be paid, Liam, I said, trying to keep my voice steady, and that the money I send you is money I worked for, money I need for my own future. Mother leaned forward, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. But he's your brother, Alara. Family helps family. You know Dad would want us to look out for each other. My father, God rest his soul, had been a quiet, passive man who had let Mother manage everything, including our relationships. Invoking his name was her favorite tactic, a subtle, potent guilt trip. I do look out for him, I said, the words feeling weak even to my own ears. I've sent him thousands over the past few years. And he appreciates it, don't you, dear? Mother prompted Liam. Liam nodded vaguely. Yeah, thanks, Alara. It was said without sincerity, a perfunctory acknowledgement of the transaction, not the sacrifice. This time is different, though, Mother continued, pressing her advantage. This is crucial. If he gets evicted, it'll ruin his credit. He'll never find another place. It'll set him back years. We can't let that happen. We? Since when was this we? It was always I, doing the actual helping, the actual paying. I can't just pull out 2,000 euros right now, I lied, the lie feeling heavy and suffocating in my mouth. My emergency fund had enough, but saying yes meant depleting it again, pushing back my own goals, perpetuating the cycle. Saying no felt terrifying, like I was failing some fundamental test of family loyalty. Mother's expression hardened almost imperceptibly, but her voice remained soft, laced with disappointment. Oh, Alara, I thought you'd understand. He's really in a bind. I don't know what I'm going to do. I can't help him myself, not after the car repairs. The car repairs I had also contributed significantly to, though she didn't mention that part. This was her genius, making his problem her problem, and then making her problem my problem, all while implying my reluctance was a personal slight, a lack of love. I looked from her pleading face to Liam's expectant one. The air felt thick with unspoken demands and old patterns. My whole life, I had been the reliable one, the fixer, the one who smoothed things over, the one who never asked for much, and certainly never burdened anyone else. My brother was the opposite. He was the one whose emotions were handled with care, whose struggles were amplified, whose needs superseded everyone else's. It wasn't just money, it was energy, attention, worry. It was the constant, low-level anxiety about his welfare that seemed to occupy more space in my mother's mind than her own health, or mine. Growing up, it had been the same. Liam scraped a knee. Mother hovered for hours. I broke my arm falling off my bike. She told me to stop crying. I was strong. Liam struggled with homework. Hours of tutoring, special help. I aced my exams. A brief nod, then back to Liam's struggles. Liam wanted a new toy. He got it. I saved for months for something. It was often suggested I didn't really need it, or that the money could be better used for a family expense, which usually meant something Liam wanted or needed. The narrative was clear. Liam was fragile, deserving of limitless support. I was robust, capable, and my capabilities were primarily valuable in how they could serve the family, which primarily meant serving Liam. I remember once, in my early 20s, excitedly telling my mother about a potential promotion at work. Her response? "That's nice, dear. Did you hear Liam got that part-time job at the cafe? I'm so worried about him balancing it with his studies." My news, my achievement, was instantly eclipsed, reframed as secondary to Liam's minor life adjustment. It wasn't malicious, not overtly, but it was a consistent, soul-wearing pattern of subtle dismissal. The weight of years of this dynamic pressed down on me in that living room. The thousands of euros I had given, the weekends I had spent helping Liam move or fix things, the hours I had spent listening to my mother worry about him while rarely being asked about my own life, my own stresses. It was a slow, silent erosion of my sense of self-worth within the family unit. I existed, it seemed, primarily as a resource for Liam's well-being. "Please, Alara," Mother said, her voice breaking just slightly, a masterclass in emotional manipulation. "For me, just this once." Just this once. It was never just this once. It was always the beginning of the next time. My gaze drifted to a photo on the mantelpiece, a family portrait from about 10 years prior. We were all smiling, but looking closer, I saw the tension around my own eyes, the way I was angled slightly away from the center where Mother and Liam stood close together. Father, a silent presence beside them. Even in the picture, I felt peripheral. A wave of exhaustion washed over me, so profound it was physical. It wasn't just the money. It was the emotional cost of being the reliable one, the responsible one, the one whose own needs were perpetually deferred. It was the cost of the unspoken expectation that my life, my resources, my emotional energy were not fully my own, but belonged, at least in part, to the family's project of keeping Liam afloat. I took a deep breath. The air felt impossibly heavy. I'll, I'll see what I can do," I heard myself say, the words escaping before I could stop them. The relief that flooded Mother's face was immediate and palpable. Liam relaxed back into the chair. The transaction was complete. My boundary, so tentative and fragile, had crumbled again. As I drove home that evening, the setting sun painting the sky in hues of orange and purple, I felt a deep, bitter resentment brewing within me. It wasn't just about the money, though that was a tangible symbol of the exploitation. It was about the principle. It was about the constant, unspoken message that my well-being was less important than my brother's, that my hard work was just a means to facilitate his lack of it, that my role in the family was primarily that of a safety net and a silent provider. That resentment festered over the next few weeks. I transferred the money to Liam's account, watching the number shrink on my own balance and feeling a cold dread. It felt like I was paying for the privilege of being ignored. I started to notice just how often the conversation with my mother revolved around Liam. His job prospects, or lack thereof, his health, his mood, his plans. My life, my work, my friends, my interests, my hopes for the future, felt like footnotes, skimmed over quickly to get back to the main topic: Liam. I tried talking to a friend about it, vaguely, without going into too much detail about the finances. "It's just, my family dynamic is a bit intense," I'd said, feeling a shame I couldn't quite articulate. Shame that I was still caught in this pattern in my mid-30s. Shame that I resented my own family. Shame that I couldn't just say no. My friend offered sympathy, but I didn't truly convey the depth of the issue, the specific pattern of financial and emotional drain. It felt too complex, too ingrained, too embarrassing. The incident with the rent money was the pebble that started a small avalanche of introspection. I began to re-examine past events, seeing them through a new, clearer lens. not as isolated incidents of helping family, but as part of a consistent pattern of favoritism and exploitation. There was the time years ago when I had just started my first real job and was saving for a car. Liam decided he wanted to move to a different city for a few months on a whim, and Mother had guilted me into contributing a significant portion of my savings for his relocation costs. I had driven my old, unreliable car for another 2 years because of it. There was the summer I spent renovating the family kitchen, dedicating all my weekends and using my bonus from work to help pay for materials, because Liam was too busy and not practical with his hands. Mother praised Liam's artistic talent instead of his absence, while my physical labor and financial contribution were simply expected. There were countless smaller instances, loaning him money for clothes, paying for his phone bill, buying his groceries when he was short, covering his share of gifts for family occasions. It wasn't just money, it was the assumption of my time, my energy, my emotional resilience. I was the family's unpaid, unappreciated, always available support system. The realization was like a cold shock. I wasn't just a member of the family, I was a role. The role of the strong, self-sufficient one who could be relied upon to fix problems and provide resources, thereby enabling the continued fragility and dependence of the favored child. My identity within the family felt entirely transactional. My value was tied to my utility. This clarity, painful as it was, began to shift something inside me. The simmering resentment began to solidify into a quiet anger, and beneath the anger, a flicker of self-preservation. I started reading articles about toxic family dynamics, about favoritism, about setting boundaries. The words resonated deeply, describing dynamics that felt eerily familiar. Phrases like emotional labor, golden child, scapegoat. Though I wasn't exactly a scapegoat, I was definitely the responsible adult burden bearer. And enabling jumped out at me. I saw my mother not just as a worrying parent, but as someone whose own anxieties and unfulfilled needs led her to infantilize one child while over-relying on the other. I saw Liam not just as a struggling brother, but as someone who had learned that helplessness was a powerful tool, a way to ensure perpetual care and avoid responsibility. And I saw myself as someone who had, for 35 years, unknowingly participated in this dynamic, believing that my worth was tied to my ability to be helpful, to be needed in this specific, draining way. The thought of changing this felt monumental, terrifying. It was like trying to redirect a river that had been flowing in the same course for decades. What would happen if I said no? What would happen if I wasn't the reliable one? Would their love, conditional as it seemed, disappear entirely? The fear of rejection, of being truly cast out or deemed selfish, was a powerful deterrent. Yet, the alternative felt worse. The thought of continuing like this, of watching my own financial security and emotional well-being slowly erode to prop up a system that didn't value me, was unbearable. I pictured myself 10, 20 years down the line, exhausted, resentful, perhaps having missed opportunities in my own life because I was too busy managing theirs. The prospect was bleak. I decided I needed help, real help. I booked an appointment with a therapist. Walking into her office for the first time, my hands trembled slightly. Admitting that my family relationships were deeply troubled felt like a failure. The therapist, Dr. Lena Schmidt, was kind and perceptive. She listened patiently as I, haltingly at first, then with a rush of pent-up emotion, poured out the history of the dynamic, the constant demands, the favoritism, the feeling of being unseen. I cried, big, heaving sobs that seemed to release years of swallowed frustration and sadness. "It sounds like you've been carrying a very heavy load, Ilara," she said softly when I had finished, offering me a tissue. I I just don't understand why they don't see it," I said, my voice thick. "Why am I always the one expected to sacrifice? Why is Liam never held accountable?" Dr. Schmidt explained the concept of family systems, how roles develop and become entrenched. How sometimes parents unintentionally create these dynamics based on their own histories and personalities. How the golden child and the responsible one roles serve a function within the system, even if they are harmful to the individuals in those roles. Your brother has learned that being in crisis brings him attention and resources, she said. And your mother has learned that her anxiety is soothed when you step in to fix things. You, in turn, have learned that your value comes from being the fixer, the reliable one. It's a cycle. A cycle. The word resonated. It felt exactly like a cycle I was trapped in. But how do I break it? I asked, feeling a sliver of hope mixed with apprehension. By changing your part in it, she said. You can't change their behavior, but you can change yours. That means setting boundaries. Boundaries. The word felt both powerful and terrifying. Setting a boundary with my family, with my mother especially, felt like an act of rebellion, an act of selfishness. We talked about what boundaries looked like. Not just saying no, but deciding what I was and was not willing to do, communicate or accept, and then enforcing that decision, even in the face of their likely negative reactions. She warned me that my family would probably resist, that they might escalate their tactics, guilt-tripping, anger, playing the victim, trying to enlist other family members. This wasn't because they were necessarily bad people, but because I was disrupting a deeply ingrained system that worked for them, even if it was killing me. Their reaction is not a reflection of your worth, Alara, she said gently. It's a reflection of their discomfort with the change. It will be hard. You need to be prepared for that. Prepared. I wasn't sure I could be, but the thought of staying where I was felt like a slow death. The pain of staying had finally become greater than the fear of leaving, or in this case, the fear of changing my place within the system. The opportunity to set a significant boundary came sooner than I expected. A few months after my therapy started, my mother called. Her voice was tight with urgency. Ilara, you won't believe this. The roof. The roof is leaking. It's terrible. Water everywhere. The family home. An old house, inherited from my grandparents, that needed constant upkeep. My parents had always struggled financially, and upkeep had often been deferred. Dad had done what he could, but after he passed, Mother seemed overwhelmed, relying on me and Liam for various tasks, though mostly me. Oh no, that's awful, I said, genuinely concerned. Did you call someone? Yes, I had a roofer come out. It's bad, Alara. Really bad. He said the whole roof needs replacing. It's going to cost, well, it's going to cost 50,000 euros. 50,000 euros. My breath hitched. That was more than my entire savings, painstakingly accumulated over 15 years of work, careful budgeting, and denying myself things Liam seemed to get without asking. That was my down payment on a future. 50,000? I repeated, the number echoing in my mind like a death knell for my dreams. Yes, and the insurance. Well, you know how it is with old houses. They won't cover all of it, maybe 10,000 if we're lucky. So, 40,000 needed? My voice was barely a whisper. Yes, Mother confirmed. Then, after a pause, she launched into the familiar script. Now, I don't have that kind of money, Alara, you know that. And Liam, well, you know Liam. He's still finding his feet. He certainly can't help. Here it was, the inevitable pivot, the unspoken expectation hardening into a palpable demand. So, she continued, her voice a little brighter, as if presenting a reasonable solution. I was thinking. You have your savings, don't you? You've always been so good with money. If you could, well, if you could lend us the 40,000, just until we figure things out, we could pay you back, eventually. My world tilted. Lend us meaning her, for the house she owned, for the benefit of Liam who contributed nothing. 40,000, my future. Paid back eventually. Eventually, in my family's lexicon meant never. It meant another entry on the long list of my resources absorbed by their needs. I gripped the phone, my knuckles white, my heart hammered against my ribs. This wasn't a couple of thousand for rent, this was everything. This was the culmination of years of subtle, and not so subtle, financial and emotional exploitation. This was the moment I had feared in therapy, the moment where the pattern would demand my very foundation. Silence stretched between us, thick and heavy. I could almost hear her holding her breath on the other end. My mind raced. The years of putting their needs first. The constant anxiety about my own financial state because of the drain. The feeling of being a resource, not a daughter. Doctor. Schmidt's words echoed. By changing your part in it, setting boundaries. This was the boundary. This was the moment. Mother, I said, my voice trembling slightly, but the word felt solid, grounded. I can't do that. The silence returned, but this time it was different. It was a shocked, brittle silence. You can't? She finally said, her voice thin with disbelief. No, I repeated, finding strength as I spoke. That's my savings. That's my down payment for a flat. I've worked for 15 years for that money. I can't just give it away. Give it away? Her voice rose, losing its fragile quality and hardening into indignation. It's not giving it away, Alara. It's helping your family. Your home. Where you grew up. It's your home, Mother, I corrected gently, but firmly. And yes, I grew up there, and I care about it. But it's not my responsibility to pay for a new roof with my life's savings. But Liam can't help, and I can't. The panic was real now, but it was coupled with a swift, chilling anger. What are we supposed to do? Let the house fall down? Be ruined? There are other options, I said, forcing myself to stay calm. You could take out a loan. You could sell the house and downsize. Maybe Liam could get a second job or a loan himself. A loan? At my age? Sell the house? Your father would be devastated. She leaned heavily on the dead, as always, a master manipulator. And Liam? He's struggling enough as it is, he can barely manage his rent. Exactly, I said, a new, cold clarity settling over me. He can barely manage his rent, because he's never had to, because you've always enabled him, and I've always picked up the pieces. This isn't healthy, Mother, for any of us. Healthy? She scoffed, the sound sharp and dismissive. You think asking your daughter to help her family is unhealthy? What's unhealthy is you, refusing to help us when we're in trouble. After everything we've done for you. Ah, the everything we've done for you card, another classic. The implication being that basic parenting, housing me, feeding me, raising me, was a debt I owed and could now repay with my entire financial future. You raised me, Mother, I said, my voice gaining strength. That's what parents do. I'm grateful for that, but I don't owe you my financial security. You have no idea what you're saying, she spat, the veneer of pleading gone, revealing the steel beneath. This is your family, Ilara. Your brother. He could end up on the street if we lose the house. Is that what you want? The guilt-tripping escalated rapidly, exactly as Dr. Schmidt had predicted. She painted a bleak, exaggerated picture, putting the blame and the potential catastrophic consequences squarely on my shoulders. The weight of it was immense. A lifetime of conditioning telling me I was being selfish, cruel, a bad daughter, a bad sister. But something had fundamentally shifted within me. The image of my depleted bank account, the cancelled dreams of my own home, the years of quiet resentment, they solidified my resolve. I wasn't being selfish. I was finally being self-preserving. That's not my fault, Mother, I said, the words feeling incredibly difficult to speak, yet liberating. Liam is a grown man. He needs to take responsibility for his own life, and you need to find a solution for the house that doesn't involve bankrupting me. I can't believe this, she said, her voice trembling with what sounded like genuine distress, though I suspected it was also performance. My own daughter, refusing to help her family in their time of need. I help when I can, Mother, I said, but this is too much. This is not helping. This is enabling, and it's destroying me financially and emotionally. I can't do it. The line went silent again. This time, it felt final. The invisible ties that had bound me to this dynamic for so long felt like they were stretching, straining, perhaps snapping. "Fine," she said eventually, her voice cold, hard. "If that's how you feel. If you don't care about your family, don't expect us to help you if you ever need anything." It was the ultimate threat, the implied withdrawal of love and support. The old me would have crumbled, apologized, found a way to scrape the money together, desperate to restore the illusion of harmony, terrified of being cut off. But the new me, the one who had cried in Dr. Schmidt's office and faced the painful truth of my family dynamic, held firm. "I understand," I said, my voice steady now. It wasn't defiant, just calm acceptance. I understood the conditionality of their help, just as I understood the conditionality of their love. It was based on my willingness to comply, to serve their needs. She hung up without another word. The silence after the call was deafening. My hands were still shaking. I sank onto the sofa, my heart still pounding. It was over. The confrontation I had dreaded, the boundary I had feared setting, was done, and I hadn't caved. Tears welled in my eyes, but they weren't tears of sadness, not entirely. They were tears of release, of grief for the family I wished I had, the unconditional love I had longed for, and tears of sheer, exhausted relief. I had done it. I had prioritized myself. The immediate aftermath was difficult, just as Dr. Schmidt had warned. My mother didn't call. Liam didn't call. Days turned into a week. The silence stretched, heavy, and punitive. It felt like I was being held in solitary confinement, waiting for the sentence. A week later, I received a text message from Liam. It was short, accusatory. "Can't believe you did this to Mum. Thanks for nothing." I looked at the message for a long time. It hurt, but it didn't break me. It confirmed everything Dr. Schmidt and I had discussed. Their inability to see beyond their own perspective, their quickness to blame me for setting a reasonable boundary. I didn't respond. My mother eventually called, a few weeks later. Her voice was clipped, formal. She didn't mention the roof, or the money, or our conversation. She talked about mundane things, local gossip, the weather. It was an unspoken agreement to pretend the confrontation hadn't happened, but the tension crackled beneath the surface of her carefully neutral tone. The warmth was gone, the easy familiarity replaced by a brittle politeness. The dynamic had changed, irreversibly. I was no longer the automatic fixer, the reliable resource. I had stepped out of the role they had assigned me, and they didn't like it. My conversations with my mother became infrequent, stilted. We talked about nothing of substance. She never asked about my work, my life, my feelings. The focus remained, subtly, on Liam's latest minor drama, or on her own perceived hardships. But she never again asked me for a significant amount of money. The boundary held. Liam occasionally texted, usually asking for small sums, testing the waters. I politely but firmly declined. "Sorry, Liam. I can't help with that right now." He would react with petulance or silence, but he didn't push. My consistent refusal, devoid of apology or explanation, was a language they were slowly, grudgingly, learning. The emotional toll was still significant. There was grief for the loss of the close family connection I had always yearned for, even while recognizing how unhealthy it was. There was guilt, a residue of years of conditioning, whispering that I was a bad person for prioritizing myself. There was sadness that my relationship with my mother had become so distant, so transactional. But alongside the pain, there was a growing sense of liberation. With my savings intact, I started researching flats. The prospect of owning my own home, a space that was entirely mine, felt incredibly empowering. It wasn't just a financial goal. It was a symbol of my independence, my self-sufficiency, my ability to build my own secure foundation, free from the constant threat of it being used to shore up someone else's instability. I continued therapy with Dr. Schmidt. We worked through the layers of conditioning, the guilt, the grief. I learned to validate my own feelings, to trust my own judgment, to recognize that setting boundaries was not selfish but necessary for my well-being. We explored the roots of my people-pleasing tendencies, understanding how they developed in response to the family dynamic. I started investing more energy into my friendships. Without the constant drain of family drama and expectations, I had more time, more emotional capacity. I found genuine connection, reciprocal relationships where support flowed both ways. My friends saw me, asked about my life, celebrated my successes, listened to my struggles, without expecting anything in return beyond mutual care. It was a revelation. My identity began to shift. I was no longer defined by my role as the responsible one or the family's resource. I was Alara. I was capable, yes, but I was also allowed to be vulnerable, to have needs, to pursue my own happiness. My worth was intrinsic, not tied to my utility to others. Years passed. The distance between me and my immediate family grew. It wasn't a dramatic, doors-slamming estrangement, but a quiet, slow drift. Visits became rare, phone calls even rarer. When we did interact, the conversations remained superficial. The underlying issues were never addressed, the past never truly acknowledged. They never apologized for the years of exploitation, the blatant favoritism, the attempt to take my life's savings. Perhaps they didn't even see it that way. Perhaps, in their narrative, I was the one who had abandoned them, the one who had been selfish. That was a painful realization, that they might never understand, might never see my perspective, might never acknowledge the harm that had been done. But with the help of therapy and my supportive network, I learned to accept that their validation wasn't necessary for my healing. My own validation was enough. I bought my flat 2 years after the roof incident. Standing in the empty rooms, the keys heavy in my hand, I felt a profound sense of accomplishment. This was mine. I had earned this. Every euro, every sacrifice, every boundary I had set had led me here. It was more than just property. It was a physical manifestation of my reclaimed autonomy. I furnished it slowly, deliberately, creating a space that felt safe, calm, and reflected me. I hosted friends, built a life that felt authentic and fulfilling. I learned to enjoy my own company, to trust my instincts, to say no without guilt, to say yes to things that genuinely brought me joy. My relationship with money changed too. It was no longer a source of anxiety and a resource for others, but a tool for building my own secure future, for pursuing my own goals, for experiencing the world. I traveled, took up hobbies, invested in my own growth. The scars of the past remained, of course. The ingrained habit of anticipating others' needs, the slight flinch at perceived criticism, the lingering sadness about the family I had lost. But they were scars, not open wounds. They were reminders of where I had been and how far I had come. Looking back now, from the quiet peace of my own home, built on my own terms, I see the girl I was, anxious, eager to please, desperate for validation from a system that was fundamentally flawed. I feel immense compassion for her. She didn't know any better. She was just trying to survive, to be loved, in the only way she knew how within that system. And I see the woman I have become, stronger, clearer, fiercely protective of my boundaries and my peace. I am no longer defined by my family's needs or expectations. I am defined by my own values, my own choices, my own quiet strength. The betrayal was a catalyst, a painful push that forced me to examine my life and make radical changes. It was the destruction of a false foundation that allowed me to build a real one. It wasn't a dramatic fight that freed me, but a quiet refusal to continue participating in a dynamic that was destroying me. It was the slow, deliberate process of reclaiming my self-worth, euro by euro, boundary by boundary, therapy session by therapy session. It was realizing that my value wasn't in how much I could give, but simply in who I was. And that realization, was the most valuable thing I ever gained. More valuable than any amount of money, more valuable than acceptance from people who couldn't see my worth. It was the knowledge that I was enough, just as I was, deserving of my own safety, security, and peace. The cost of silence, of people-pleasing, had been immense. The cost of finding my voice, of setting boundaries, had been painful, but the reward, my reclaimed self, my authentic life, was immeasurable. I stood alone, yes, in some ways, but I stood on solid ground, ground I had built myself. So, that's my story. It's not neat or tied up in a perfect bow. Relationships are complex, and healing is ongoing. But I am no longer the person who stood in that hallway, trembling at the thought of saying no. I am the woman who built her own home, her own peace, and found her voice. If any part of my story resonated with you, if you felt unseen, undervalued, or trapped in similar dynamics, I want you to know you're not alone. Your feelings are valid. Your needs matter. And change, though incredibly difficult, is possible. It starts with a whisper, a small boundary, a quiet refusal to continue the old dance. Thank you for listening. If this story touched you, please consider giving it a like. Subscribing would mean the world to me, as it helps me share these stories and connect with others who might be on a similar path. And I'd love to hear your thoughts. Have you experienced similar situations? What helped you find your voice or set boundaries? Let me know in the comments below. Your experiences are important, and sharing them can help others feel less alone. Until next time, take care of yourselves. You are worth prioritizing.